going to start a lesson today on absolute value equations and inequalities. This particular video will cover absolute value equations. So this is section 3.5 in your book, and we're going to start talking about an absolute value. An absolute value, if you'll remember, if I have something that says the absolute value of x is equal to 5, that means that x has to be 5 units away from the middle of a number line. So there are two numbers that will work in here. X could be either 5 or it could be -5, because the absolute value of 5 is 5 and the absolute value of -5 is 5. So whatever's inside of here can either be positive or negative, and then the result is positive. I could have something like the absolute value of x plus 5 is equal to 1. So if I wanted to find the two values that would work for x, that would make the absolute value of x plus 5 equal to 1, what I would need to do is just set up two separate equations. X plus 5 would equal 1, or x plus 5 would equal -1. So x can be, if I subtract 5 from both sides, it could be -4, or if I subtract 5 here, it could be -6. Both of those can plug in, and when you take the absolute value, it can give you 1. If you want to check your answers, you can always go to the calculator and plug them in. Okay, so if it's the absolute value of x plus 5 equals 1, and we got -4 for an answer, so I'd go to math, go over to number, and choose absolute value of -4 plus 5. And see if that gives me 1, and it does. And then we also got -6, so I'd go to math and arrow over to number, choose absolute value, and try -6 plus 5, and that also gives me 1. So both of those answers worked, and they checked out on the calculator. All right, it could get a little bit more complicated. I could have something like problem 24 in the book, which is the absolute value of x minus 4 plus 3 is equal to 9. This is problem 24. Before you can take care of the absolute value, you have to have it isolated. So the first thing I want to do is subtract 3 from both sides. And I'd get the absolute value of x minus 4. This cancels, equals 6. So either x minus 4 would have to be 6, or x minus 4 would have to be x minus 4. Sorry, would have to be -6, because the absolute value of 6 is 6, and the absolute value of -6 is 6. So add 4 to both sides. X would have to be 10, or add 4 to both sides. X would have to be -2. So my two answers are -2 and 10. And you can go back to your original problem and check that out. Occasionally there is no answer. Problem number 6 says the absolute value of x is equal to -3/5. There is nothing that I can plug in for x that would give me a negative result. I can plug a negative in between the absolute values, but I can't get a negative as my output. So if there's anything where it says the absolute value is equal to a negative, your answer is always going to be no solution. All right, let me do one that's a little bit more complicated, and then we're going to end this video and talk about absolute value inequalities. I'll try problem 32 from this section. It says 5 minus the absolute value of 4x plus 3 is equal to 2. The first thing I'm going to do is subtract 5 from both sides. So that cancels over here, and I get negative times the absolute value of 4x plus 3 equals -3. Divide both sides by -1. So I get the absolute value of 4x plus 3 is equal to 3. So now I'm going to have two separate equations. 4x plus 3 is equal to 3, and 4x plus 3 is equal to -3. Subtract 3 from both sides, I get 4x is equal to 0. Divide by 4, it'd be x is equal to 0. There's one of my answers. Subtract 3, I'd get 4x equals -6. Divide by 4, I get x equals -1.5. So my two answers are 0 and negative 1.5. So that's our first video. That's on equations. It's quite a bit simpler than the rational and the radical equations we've been doing. So I'm going to end this, and then I'll do a quick video on absolute value inequalities.